The following presentation is a WARZ television production. The Molina Family Story, Part 5, in living color. The 1960s was an exciting time for the nation's new frontier. The space race led to new innovations as the country extended its reach to the moon. But it was also a time of tragedy and sadness, as we all paused to mourn more than once. And it was a time of social change, upheaval, and political unrest as the nation transformed itself towards the dream for the betterment of all. Join us once again as we present the continuing story of the Molinas throughout the 1960s.
We begin tonight's episode in Florida with Herminio and Tonita moving into their new home with Hector and Aleta in the Coconut Grove suburb of Miami. Herminio and Antonio were both working as waiters downtown at the Lighthouse Seafood Restaurant. Then in July of 1968, Hector married Kathleen McGee at the Little Flower Church in Hollywood, Florida. They moved into their new home on Bruce Terrace in Hollywood. Then in September of the following year, their first child, Michelle, was born on September 24, 1969. Meanwhile, back in New York, Mirda and Fred welcomed their third child, John Michael, on January 9, 1962 into their family. And along with their two other sons, Alfred and Stephen, they all moved out to Long Island in November 1963. Fred worked in the city at RCA Global Communications, aiding in the development of satellite telecommunications for NASA. While raising their three boys, Mirda worked as an accountant for a local firm. Sadly, in July of 1960, the Molina patriarch, Miguel Angel Molina, who was the architect of the family's move to the United States, passed away at the age of 81 in the Bronx. He was laid to rest at St. Raymond Cemetery. His spirit and love still lives on within all of us, his descendants. The New York World's Fair brought millions to its innovative exhibits and thrilling rides in Flushing Meadows Park in Queens. Not far from it all, Gus was living with Olga and their two sons Raymond and Robbie at their home in Kew Gardens. Gus was the owner of his own jewelry shop. Then one day while at work, there was an attempted robbery. There was an exchange of gunfire, and he was shot. He survived his wounds and continued operating the business. Olga managed the home and while raising the boys, took up oil painting as a hobby. Then in 1964 Raymond entered in the U.S. Marine Corps and was deployed to Vietnam and was wounded during a skirmish in 1967 at Quezon by shrapnel from a grenade. He was airlifted to Japan, then transported to St. Albans Naval Hospital for surgery to remove the shrapnel. He remained in the Marines until 1969 when he was honorably discharged. During the early 1960s, New York City was the thriving center of a new emerging culture. The economic influences of Wall Street along the major banking concerns had already centered their operations in Manhattan. The prosperity of a booming economy increased the demand for consumer goods, bringing about new fashions, colors and fabrics designs for both men and women. Madison Avenue became an advertising mecca for admin, writers, and producers. The city was also the entertainment capital for television, radio, the stage and music as they all experienced advancements and change as the decade continued. We now continue our program after a word from our sponsor.
In the dull and commonplace occurrences of day-to-day living, one thing stands out as a completely unique experience. Colt 45 malt liquor.
Back in the Bronx, Alfonso had become the sole proprietor of M&M Jewelry. He decided to move the business down one door to a larger facility. There he could expand his watch repair and jewelry business to include selling small appliances and seasonal toys. Then together with his son Ricky he opened L & Sons Jewelry on the Avenue of the Americas in New York City. He continued to add to his business ventures when he took possession of Bentley's Jewelry, also in Manhattan on Madison Avenue and 40th Street. The family was living in Astoria, Queens, at 2022 45th Street. Celia and Big Nancy moved into the first-floor apartment of the same building where Alfonso and Alice were already living. Alice was working for Knickerbocker Beer Brewery in New York City. She was also an avid bowler, bringing home several trophies. Alice and Alfonso loved to entertain with birthday parties, hosting family during the holidays and especially New Year's Eve. In December of 1961, Ricky married Dolores Ann Burke in Lynchburg, Virginia, but they later divorced. And in 1966 Nancy married Richard Lyons on September 17, 1966, at the St. Nicholas of Tolentine Church in Queens, New York. Ricky remarried in 1968 to Rose Mayhutso in the Bronx. We now continue our program after a word from our sponsor.
Nothing takes it off like Noxema medicated shave.
The closer you shave, the more you need Noxema. Noxema medicated comfort shave.
Back in Florida while Antonio was living in Coral Gables, he started traveling, and among the places he ventured to was Puerto Rico several times. Then in July of 1960 with Gilda they traveled back to the island so that they could visit family. His travels included a trip to Spain with Tonito and Gilda to see family that stayed behind in the old country. While many Puerto Ricans left the island for the mainland to pursue economic opportunities. In 1963 Mario and Carmen left New York to settle down on the island, to join Eileen and her family. Mickey and Myrna also planted roots on Puerto Rico and started raising their family. Mickey served in the Army, and attended flight school in Puerto Rico. He was then stationed in Brazil to aid in conducting the Brazilian geodesic survey. After his military service, he became a flight engineer and instructor of Pan American Airlines.